Briefly, what I'm going to cover is a little bit about myself and my Mahara journey. About this company, the company name is not Accordian. It's been anonymised for various reasons. So a little bit about Accordian and where they thought they were as an organisation. I'm going to talk about the dream, which was my PhD, the reality, which was the horror of my PhD, and hopefully some lessons for others who are trying to repurpose technology, trying to use a technology that it wasn't originally used. And believe it or not, the technology I was trying to repurpose was Mahara. I've been at Birmingham City University, BCU, for 13 years now. I was in the School of Computing. I'm now in the business school, and I lead a centre called the Centre for Internal Audit, Governance and Risk Management, which means that my business cards have to be about that long. As well as that, for a couple of years, I actually was the lead academic for Technology Enhanced Learning and Teaching, another long business card. We've used Mahara extensively in the business school since 2009, and some of you might have seen the JISC projects with John Kerwin, enhancing employability using e-portfolios. I didn't actually get onto the video. I was sort of in the background actually showing the students what to do as part of that. We do still use Mahara. It was great to see Jay talking about it yesterday, but the coverage is patchy, I think is a good phrase to use. There are certain areas of excellence that we've seen. The business school started off really big with the use of Mahara, and it was compulsory for all first years, and it was actually summative, and we've actually had to pull back slightly from that. One of the reasons I think is that we do appear not to have not even the latest version or the latest but one version. We've actually realised from our talks today that we've actually got a completely unsupported version. So we one of the first things we're going to have to do when we get back is to get that sorted and get that sorted. Need to tell you a little about this company. This company is called Accordian. It's a very large, as in, depending on how you measure it, 1,000 or 2,500 employees, based in the Midlands, but has a spread really across down into the south of England now. Predominantly social housing, but also does some care, does some community projects as well. It's set up as a not-for-profit organisation. That doesn't actually mean they're not allowed to make a profit. Or it does mean that any surplus that's generated doesn't go out to shareholders, it's reinvested back in the organisation. I worked with the organisation for over 3 years in total, and it was all the time that I was there, it was undergoing a massive change, both in structures, both in its responsibilities, and in innovative ways that it was actually delivering some of its housing. When we think social housing, I think some of us still think of these sorts of council houses or ex-council houses. Now, there is still a limited amount of stock that many housing associations have, which looks quite like that. Maybe the pram's been updated slightly from there. This is Accordian's latest development, and these are the houses that they now class as being best-in-class social housing. These are actually made by Accordian in their own factory in a flat pack format, took on a low loader and built, and they've been in the news. They've built a house in 48 hours completely as part of this process. So they are an incredibly innovative organisation. They considered themselves, and when I talked to the chief exec and the learning development manager, they consider themselves a learning organisation as per Peter Senge, and there are 5 elements of a learning organisation. This was the one I was interested in, personal mastery. There's a definition there by Senge about sustainable source of competitive advantage is your organisation's ability to learn from its competition. In my day job, I teach strategic management, and I believe so not talk an awful lot about Peter Senge about how you get your strategic competitive advantage as part of this. So, what was my big idea? What was I going to devote over 3 years of my life to? It's a good start. It was being successfully used in my institution. That's our brand new building, Curzon building, where I currently share an office. Anyone else moved from sharing an office, from having their own office to sharing an office? It's traumatising. It's emotionally traumatising. What I wanted to do is move Mahara from a higher education institution into a workplace that had not used Mahara, had not used ePortfolio, had not used any tool of that sort. So what was I doing? I was repurposing a technology. Thomas Edison, when he invented the telephone, envisaged that it would be used to broadcast public concerts, that you would dial in to Carnegie Hall, I won't say the Lincoln Centre because that wasn't built then, and you would actually listen to those concerts. He had no idea that there would be a need or a demand for one-to-one communication. Similar problem, similar challenge for text messaging. I remember the first time I saw a text message was in a mobile phone advert for the Orange Company, and they were trying to think, why would anybody want to send a text message? And the only instance that they could come up with it was that the husband was in a meeting and he received a text from the wife to say, we've sold the house. And that was the only example that they could think of why you would ever send a text message. So, a classic example of this is technological determinism, a solution in search of a problem. And to a certain extent, I acknowledge that this is what I was trying to do. I was trying to repurpose the technology that I was familiar with, that I could see the advantages of, that to a certain extent I was passionate about, applied to an organisation. So, practicalities. I had 9 participants, and I worked with them over a year on an action research project, with the full cycle of action research of plan, do, check, act, and go back in and adjust as part of that. The 9 volunteers were selected across the whole organisation, and we'll see some of their titles, by the Learning and Development Manager. These were people that he'd taken a special interest in as part of the organisation and thought might be amenable to the technology. Got the ethical approval to do this from Lancaster University, because this was all part of my PhD. They had the right to withdraw. And what was this mammoth task I was asking them to do? Create a portfolio, share it with me, and share some of it with their manager. Not particularly challenging, I thought. These were the participants. I'm not going to dwell too long on this. Just look at the different length of services though. Some on there 30 years service, someone had been there 18 months, ranging from apprentice housing officer to the operations director, effectively number 2 within that part of the organisation. So a broad cross-section, a broad mix of people. Now, which product do you think I chose? I had to go out there, I had to evaluate. Did look at Google Sites. Free, relatively easy, but there was still quite a steep learning curve. I did look at an alternative provider, and they were very kindly going to provide me with 2 years of free ePortfolio to run this on, but it'll come as no surprise to anybody that I selected my tool of choice. And the university was happy for me to allow these students access to our Mahara ePortfolio, but there were real issues of ownership then. Who owned that portfolio? Was it the participants? Was it the organisation ACCORDIAN? Was it the university? Was it me? So I decided I didn't want to go down that route, and in fact I used a service that Jay mentioned that's still there, Folio for Me, which provides a limited space, limited size space of portfolio space, but actually I thought would work for this project. Time passed. I visited them 3 times over the year. Remembering this was 9 participants over 3 different sites, different skill levels. It was quite an intense time, actually, plus mentoring in between, plus the occasional email. It was really interesting when David and Jane from Rose Bruford looked at some metaphors for Mahara. This was what I was expecting: a vibrant, active portfolio community, hopefully a community of practice as noted by Wenger. this was the metaphor, unfortunately, for my participants. Google empty room. Okay. It's very hard when you're really committed to a project and you're creating a piece of academic work out of this to recognise some of the challenges that come out of this. Of the 9 participants, we had 1 withdrawal due to a family bereavement, 2 lost contact after the first interview, and no matter what I did, I could not re-establish that contact next to actually going to the office and knocking on their door, which I seemed to be a slightly passive-aggressive move. 1 did create a portfolio, yes, and shared it with me, yes. Didn't share it with the manager, and it was the most basic portfolio that you could imagine. 2 registered with the software, didn't develop it any further. 1 looked at some of the shared forums that were on the group and found that they didn't agree with some of the values that were being posted there, so they withdrew from the site, as it were, although they were still talking to myself. 1 person, and nothing against architects, some of my best friends are architects, couldn't cope with the user interface at the time. Now, I know this is an old version of Mahara. We're talking 2011, 2012 at this point, but they simply couldn't get to grips with the portfolio. The remaining participants didn't even get as far as registering. I remember this was me supporting them all the way through this. I was visited them 3 times. I'd prepared simple how-to guides for it. I was available on the phone. I was ringing them every month or so in between these sessions. And I was delighted to see that this wasn't the only slide that had horses on today. And this is how I felt. This really is how I felt. Round about 2/3 of the way through the project, when I was realising that my expectations that by creating this portfolio there could be possibly an emancipatory effect. I talked with the chief exec and the learning development manager, saying that if these people actually do develop these portfolios and they recognise the skills that they've got don't match their jobs, they may wish to look for employment outside the organisation. How do you feel about that? And they were comfortable with that, based with the actual reality. There was an unexpected demon. I've used the term structural coupling there because that was something that was unique to my PhD, talking about how different systems interact with each other. LinkedIn. I suspect you might have your own views and your own opinions on LinkedIn. I hate it at the moment for various reasons, because what I was asking the participants to do, they compared to LinkedIn, and no amount of explaining or discussion about this dissuaded them from that idea. I did try and be fair to LinkedIn in my PhD as I wrote it up, but I did find 3 challenges. And if you ever have this discussion with your colleagues of, well, an e-portfolio is just like LinkedIn, maybe you can remember some of these. Currency. This is a direct quote from someone, a participant on the project. Got a LinkedIn account, went in, registered and did all my stuff on that. I've never been back to it since. So LinkedIn has to be maintained just the same as an e-portfolio has to be maintained if it's going to retain currency. The other issue is that of connections. Almost like there's a badge of having how many Facebook friends you have. LinkedIn, the number of connections seems to be a measure of your reach, a measure of your success, a measure of your worth to a certain extent. And as you can see, the individuals that took part, I included the chief exec and the learning development manager in this because when I went and fed back to them on the success of the project, I did ask them what they thought about LinkedIn as well. The worst part of LinkedIn, I think, for me, and this is a personal opinion, is that of endorsement. Anyone who you're connected to can endorse you for any skill. There is no evidence that they have to provide for that endorsement. Therefore, you can see I've got 29 endorsements for my lecturing skills, including, I can guarantee that none of those people have actually seen me lecture. Endorsement is something that LinkedIn has got to get a hold of. It's false. It's a false endorsement. They push it. It's very easy. They actually prompt you to endorse somebody who you might have them at a first or a second level link, endorse them for a skill, and they don't know whether they can endorse you for that. Very different from how Mahara and what we're trying to push with the badges is doing in a different way. So was Accordian a learning organisation? Chief Exec thought so. The Learning and Development Manager thought so. Some of the participants thought it was a learning organisation as well. There was no correlation between what the individuals were being asked to do in their job and the organisational learning goals. So, and I did talk to the Chief Exec about this, and he grudgingly admitted this. Maybe they aren't a learning organisation in the way that we expected. So what can we learn from this experience? Well, I'm a gadget freak, I'm an Apple fanboy, but technological determinism can only get you so far in your life. Mahara is a great product. We all know that Mahara is a brilliant product, but just being a good product on its own isn't enough if you want to try and get this working within organisations. Just because there's keen high-level management interest in a project doesn't mean that cascades through to the participants or the people lower down in the organisation. I think what I didn't do is answer the question, what's in it for me? I didn't justify to the participants what they could get out of this. Now, I've got on the next slide the information I gave them in the one pager. Same for what's in it for the organisation. We all reflect on a day-to-day basis, and it was brilliant to see these kids reflecting as a natural product of their learning experience. We, unfortunately, out there in the workplace, and certainly in the single site case study, remember this was only one organisation, that doesn't actually happen. I asked them what they wanted to do in 2, 5 and 10 years time, and people struggled to find that answer, except for those that were nearing retirement. That was very easy. And doing a PhD is hard. I'll just quickly show you what these were. These were the two sales pitches that I put together. What's in it for you, and then what's in it for the organisation. I tried to tie it back to the organisational aims, but unfortunately that didn't quite happen in that way. Lessons for others. Any project needs not only top-level management support, but also the support of the management as well. When I teach strategic management, I talk about the tactical level of the organisation, the middle managers. They need to buy into the product as well. They need to buy into the process. Just having cool tech is not enough. You need to sell it. You need to sell it more. And this was one for me. Maintaining contact with individuals is no guarantee of active participation in an action research project. Action research is hard. It's harder than I thought it was. Thank you very much for your time.